Just looking at the broader picture in terms of your business and everything, what are your thoughts on the United States at the moment? How do you see things going there? I mean, in political, cultural terms, that kind of.
My wife's American. My wife's a New Yorker, Italian. Her mum was Italian, God rest her soul. She's a year dead now. And her late father, was Polish American. And so very Catholic, New York Catholic family. And I love America. And I was brought up to love America, and I was brought up to sort of see it as the kind of the ultimate sort of secular construct to aspire to, that post-World War II afterglow of the America that in my generation were brought up to love and admire. I worry for America as I see it being tortured, if you like, from the extremes on all sides. And we won't have enough time here today to get into it. I continue to have faith in America's ability to self-correct. It always looks like it's going to go off at the edge. And it looks like it's going too far one way or too far the other. Yeah. But it has the remarkable thing that's built into the construct of the United States is this self-correcting mechanism that it has, the way that it balances its powers. I think the executive has got too powerful in maybe the last 20 years. The Congress probably less powerful than it should be as a check and balance. The House of Representatives, the Senate, though, I think in hindsight, if I was going to change something in America, I would look again at how the Senate is selected. I think making the Senate popularly elected was a mistake. Mm-hmm. And I think we haven't seen the full, because it's opened up all of Congress to being vulnerable to populism. And the reason the Senate under the original construct was set up to be selected differently was another check and balance.
Yes.
And I think that when they removed that, and that was only done in the last century, that there was it's like sort of taking a wheel balancing, knocking a wheel off balance.
Yes.
Your tire wears out much faster over time. You don't notice it on any given day. But I think the Senate, if there's that, in terms of the management apparatus, I worry. I like the idea in some ways. I find it appealing of a popularly elected Senate. It's not the way it was supposed to be, and I think it's causing problems now. Now, that said, Hollywood and popular culture in America, detached from America's Judeo-Christian foundings, which were undeniably Judeo-Christian, I think that's producing some of frankly, the insanity that we're starting to see.
Yeah.
And the thing is will we self-correct from the insanity? And I like to hope that self-correction will come, but I'm not sure.
Go to the other side, so to speak, quite the other thing. Vladimir Putin. Hero, villain, sphinx without a secret. What is he?
He's the Tsar without a crown.
Ah.
He is he wants to be the Tsar. I don't know that he's particularly looking for a crown or anything. I don't think he is. I think he's the answer to what Russia thought it wanted in the early 1990s. I remember, and I heard this, if I heard it once, I heard it 1,000 times back then, where they said, we need a Pinochet. Pinochet, if some of your viewers will know, was the dictator of Chile, and quite brutal in many respects, but people will say, well, he stopped Chile slipping into
yes.
the sort of communist thing. And Pinochet was somebody I was brought up to be very, very fearful of and see as a bad guy, if you will. But yet the Russians of the 1990s they saw their country dissolve. I was only talking to somebody about this in the last few days. I mean, I remember, top flight professionals in Russia who were academicians, professors, senior engineers. Everybody worked for the state because everything was state-owned in the communist system. People who were retired, who would have had a good pension, who were on the breadline. Their pension, their monthly pension at that point had become enough maybe to buy one loaf of bread. That was it. And so they were trying to, struggling to make ends meet. They would do interpreter, anything to try and put food on the table. And they saw law and order just collapse and mafias rise up. And I remember being on one flight in Russia. We were going somewhere in southern Russia. I don't even remember where exactly it was now. We're in one of the Moscow airports. And this mafioso just gets up and starts telling people where to sit on the plane. And the flight team just stood there and didn't say anything because they were terrified. Imagine, you spend your whole career, you're an intellectual, you're a top engineer, or a professor or whatever, and now there's very obviously a thug ordering you where to sit on a plane or telling you where to stand in a line to get something. You see law and order disappear. It creates an opening for somebody that it will promise to reestablish it. We saw it with Napoleon.
Yes.
In post-revolutionary France.
Yes.
How does Napoleon get to rise to the heights that he did? Because that gap existed. So Putin is not Napoleon, thank God. He is the strong man that Russia wanted. Whether, the Navalny's of this world are what Russia really wants, or is that just a kind of an elite, a liberal elite in Russia that wants the Navalny, or is it really what the people of Vologda and and deep Russia really want? I don't know.
Do you think he has given any view to a succession? Like he hardly intends a physical dynasty, a blood dynasty.
No, it doesn't look like it. I think he lost the run of himself a bit. I know people that knew him and that said that he really lost the run of himself once he got divorced.
After a long marriage.
I heard that from somebody who his view I would trust. I think he's torn. Russia's a hard place to hold together. It is an empire.
Yes.
I mean, when you fly across that place, I've flown from Moscow to the far, to almost to Vladivostok. Mm-hmm. It's shockingly huge, that place is. The fascinating thing to me is how Putin has cozied up to Xi Jinping's China, because that is, in my view, by far and away the greatest threat to Russia is Xi Jinping's China. They could annex a huge chunk of Russia, and I don't know that there's a whole lot that today's Russia could do about it. And I don't think that that's beyond the possibility of happening at some point in the future. Goodness. So Putin's got some big challenges ahead, and I think his main challenge is to his east and south. And I think he probably is hoping that he can hold on for another 20 years and that something will show up. I think that if he thought that he could reestablish a constitutional monarchy in Russia, where the monarchy would have something more traditionally orthodox in the Russian sense of a relationship with church and state, that he would do it. Mm. I think he has concluded that Russia needs a cultural linchpin. Yeah, he's played with, sort of nostalgia for, patriotic Red Army, World War II Russia. He's toyed with, he's got to make his mind up which Russian history is he going to embrace And I think he's had a problem doing that. And I think the fact that he's a Checker man, that he's of the KGB, is a problem. Because I think I think people that have been in it and have served in it, I think it does a lot of damage to them. I'm giving an imperfect, inexact answer.
No, it's very interesting.
Because that's about where it is right now with Russia.
Yeah. So some Irish Catholics, some would see Russia, for some reason, bypassing Poland, but they would see Russia as a kind of a last redoubt, a sort of Helm's Deep of Christianity.
Yeah, no, I think that is probably... I don't want to pass judgment on Russia. I don't know. I mean, there are moments where I kind of almost sort of spine-tingling moments where you think, oh my goodness, where you think of where it came from.
Yes.
So I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago. I can't remember exactly when it was now, but it was the World War II victory parade. It used to be the equivalent of what used to be the May Day parade. So the May Day parade when I was a kid was this big communist parade of missiles and tanks and troops and everything else. But this was what replaces it, this big military parade. And I watched it, and the limousine comes out from under that archway of the Kremlin, and it's got the supreme commander of the Russian Federation forces or whatever. And he comes out from under that thing, and he's standing up in his limousine. He's about to do the review of the troops. He takes off his hat and he blesses himself.
I've seen it. Yes. Yeah, it's quite dramatic.
I was like, I mean, when you think about all those nights we kneeled down praying for the conversion of Russia, and this is, I mean, there is no Western military commander that could do that.
No.
And get away with it.
No.
I mean, they would be, they'd be in huge trouble. Because they were showing...
They'd be in private the next day.
Yeah, exactly. It was so striking. But we've got to be careful, because how much of this is theatre and how much of it is truly embracing the message of Christ.
Understood.
And that's always been the challenge of the Orthodox Church, right? I mean, we go back to Constantinople, is the interlinking of church and state in the Greco-Russian Orthodox tradition it's too close.
Yeah. I've heard that Scott Hahn initially did look at the Orthodox.
Yeah.
And interestingly, he said he felt you simply had to be Russian or Greek.
Yeah, well, they don't have any theology. I mean, if you really look at it, it's like the theology is whatever, the emperor says it is.
There we go.
We need a theology that sometimes will challenge the emperor.
So he can go nowhere without a clutch of divines at his shoulder.
Right.
Advising him. You've mentioned China. As we draw to a close, I think it's inescapable that we talk a little bit more about it. Russia has reason to be afraid. Do we?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, we do. You do. We should be afraid of ourselves first, and our own, the human tendency to, and the tendency of majorities, once they become majorities, to oppress minorities, and the threat to the Socratic approach to debate, the contest of ideas, the competition of ideas, the creation of safe spaces. All of these things are an anathema to what made the West great, that made us great thinkers, great inventors, innovators, challengers of the status quo. What we are at risk of is falling to our own risk aversion, chronic risk aversion, risk to engage with ideas, risk to acknowledge our own cultural past, our willingness to lie about it, to suit trendy narratives today, to be dedicated followers of fashion to a point that we bring about our own cultural extinction is something that we are at greatest risk of. Where China is concerned, and in particular Xi Jinping's China, communist China, is that it sees these maladies in the West as its opportunity and is ruthlessly exploiting them. You know, in the West, we learn to play chess, and in China, they learn to play this game called Go, where you basically envelop and surround. It's not about taking pieces, it's about enveloping and denying territory and space to your enemy until there's nowhere left for your opponent to go. And you've got them completely enveloped and surrounded. And I think a really interesting read in this day and age is Sun Tzu.
Yes.
Because we are seeing Xi and the Communist Party cadres playing out Sun Tzu's strategies really in textbook fashion. Yeah, it's avoid conflict where you can avoid it. It should always be the very, very last thing that you can do. And the best victories that you can win are the bloodless ones where you don't actually have to fight. And so what they've done, and it's about exploiting your enemy's weaknesses, your opponent's weaknesses. And we have a lot of weaknesses, and they are exploiting them to their fullest extent. The fact that our business cadres are so captured by crony corporatism, by protectionism, by a cronyism that is detached from charity. The reason that we've got such a spate of corporate wokeness right now is that actually those companies don't believe anything. Yes. They're not patriotic. They don't believe that the West has got better ideas than, or that, you know, Christianity or Judaism. They don't believe anything. They only believe in money. And when you don't believe in anything, you're anybody's. And, you know, the CEOs of the post-World War II generation were very, very different to the CEOs of today. You know, founder CEOs, frankly, entrepreneur CEOs are very, very different from the sort of, you know, managers who are really risk averse and apparatchiks rising to the top and virtue signaling when you know that, you know, they actually don't believe any of that stuff. You know, if they believed half of the stuff they virtue signal, why aren't they speaking out against the genocide of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang? Yes. Why is that not something that's of concern to Volkswagen or to, you know, and pick your company? These and China has been brilliant. I've seen it in my own industry in telecommunications, but we're up against Huawei and others. I mean, the way that they have operated has just been phenomenal in playing the vulnerabilities and weaknesses of our own system against us.
The future of Christianity in China?
I think China...
Fairly fraught out of that.
Well, yes, short term, very much so. My very good friend, Jimmy Lai, convert to Catholicism. His wife is Teresa. She's phenomenal. I mean, one of the great Catholics that I know, and Jimmy's one of the great Catholics that I know. He's in prison now in Hong Kong, and he may never come out again. He's the St. Thomas More of China, of today's China. He wouldn't leave. I talked to him. I was with him in London a couple of years ago, and I said, "Well, why are you going to go back? I mean, you know, you don't need to do this. This guy's, you know, extremely wealthy, very, very successful." And he said, "How can I flee? How can I leave and live in my nice house in London, or in America, or wherever he wants to be, anywhere?" He said, "How can I do that when those young people have got nowhere to run?"
Yes.
He said, "They can't flee." He said, "I have to go back."
Yes.
And it reminded me of, you know, St. Thomas More. He could have gone to France. He could have gone anywhere.
Yes.
But he didn't. He went to the Tower of London.
Yeah.
And Henry VIII sent him there, but he knew that's what was going to happen.
Yes.
But he stuck with it. He stuck with his country. He stuck with his people. And Jimmy Lai is he's really a martyr of our time.
Yes.
Really authentically a Catholic martyr. And Cardinal Zen is another. I mean, you know, one of the truly most outstanding Catholic witnesses of our time and clergymen of our time. And his heroism it's just astonishing to me to see Cardinal Zen and his willingness to take on the power of the Communist Party of China and not just and all of those who are kowtowing to the Communist Party of China, including those in our own church. That there's Cardinal Zen being this just outstanding witness for the faith, and so I think China. I was at Mass there's a church in downtown Washington D.C. In what's now a Chinese neighborhood. And I was at Mass there one Sunday morning. I don't know, I missed it somewhere else, or whatever. But it was afternoon. I think it was early, maybe 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yes.
And I ended up going to this Mass. It was all Chinese people.
Yes.
And a Chinese priest. And at that Mass, I really felt I saw the future of the Catholic Church. People on fire with the faith. A priest who clearly was, as a Catholic priest should be. And
it did what it said on the tin.
Exactly. And I had been to Mass.
Yes, yes.
And I was at Mass with people who they knew what persecution was. And it was really inspiring. And I felt actually Xi Jinping missed something here. And because I know that it was something that the Chinese were looking at. That post-Tiananmen era where it hadn't decided whether China was going to be a soldier or a philosopher or a diplomat or a businessman, as I heard one Chinese guy put it to me once. China could easily decide in a Constantinian fashion that it's going to be Christian. And if it does, the world will never be the same again. And that might happen. Because it's looking for an identity, and it's going to find, as every communist regime has always found, that communism as a state religion is something that is built on a giant lie. And China sees its future as being one of the world's truly great powers. And I think it probably will be. It certainly can be. And I think if it embraces Christianity, it will be the most powerful influencer in the world, bar none.
It's a breathtaking vision. What form of Christianity? I know we're into deep water here.
I have no idea. I have no idea. But I think if it does, what Christianity did for Europe, and what it did for America, it can do for China, and it can probably do it more spectacularly for China if China decides to embrace it. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying this will happen. I'm saying it could happen, and that China is capable of making a pivot like that. And it's capable of looking back across the passage of time, the eras of history, and seeing, I mean, okay, you can take the sort of the Gibbon's view of Christianity in the Roman Empire, which is that's what ended it. It's not, it's what saved it. It's what reformed it. It's what produced Europe.
And we tend to forget it continued in Byzantium for another 1,000 years.
Exactly. Yes, it was a restructuring and a reorg, but it, I mean, look what came out of it.
Yes. I remember interesting.
But the Communist Party of China, it has to be overthrown. Jimmy Lai, I mean, has written about this he did an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. The Communist Party of China, I'm not saying the people in the Communist Party of China, because some of them are capable of reform. The Communist Party of China is holding China down. It's got its jackboot on the throat of the Chinese people. Mm-hmm. It has them enslaved. They might be, comfortable, but they are enslaved. And I'm not saying that China needs to become Hollywood. God forbid. Yes. I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Exactly.
But the Communist Party of China is, as an entity, is evil. It is evil. And it exacts evil. And it is irreformably evil. And that's something that China needs to throw off or reverse out of, however it does that. But it needs to part ways with communism.
Yes.
Because communism constrains and restrains China It does not unleash the energy, the vitality, and the brilliance of the Chinese people.
Yes.